On a continent where control over natural resources is still heavily contested, two neighbors that recently went through a serious diplomatic rift are now presenting a united front over one of Africa's biggest proposed gas projects. In February 2026, Niger's leader, General Abdourahamane Tiani, stood beside Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune in Algiers and signaled that relations had moved into a new phase centered on relaunching the long-delayed Trans-Saharan Gas Pipeline. The project is planned as a corridor of about 4,100 kilometers, designed to carry around 30 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year. From Nigeria through Niger to Algeria's Mediterranean export hubs, and then into Europe's network via existing pipelines and liquefied natural gas facilities. That renewed political push came roughly 10 months after tensions spiked over the downing of a Malian military drone near the Odra. Mali border, an incident that led Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, grouped in the Alliance of Sahel States, to recall their ambassadors from Algiers and publicly accuse Algeria of an irresponsible act. Today, the same Algeria is offering Niger a gas corridor, security coordination, and economic cooperation, while European governments that have been trying to diversify gas supplies away from Russian routes see additional African volumes as one more option in a wider diversification strategy. This documentary-style episode traces how a period of near diplomatic breakdown has shifted into an energy partnership, what the revived pipeline could mean for the Alliance of Sahel States and its military-led governments, and why Nigeria, Niger, Algeria, and European states are all attaching strategic weight to infrastructure that would cross some of the Sahel's most unstable areas. It follows the quiet pipeline rivalry between the Trans-Saharan route, backed by Algeria, and a separate Atlantic coastal route backed by Nigeria and Morocco. It also examines whether expanded gas exports will translate into improved access to energy for African populations, and considers whether a sanctioned military-led regime in Niger can turn renewed memoranda and announcements into actual construction on the ground. In this episode, the investigation tracks how a diplomatic crisis evolved into an energy initiative, how the project could reshape bargaining power from Niamey to Algiers and Brussels, and why the outcome matters for African sovereignty, for people at home and in the diaspora. On a Monday in Algiers in mid-February 2026, state media showed General Abdourahamane Tiani and President Abdelmadjid Tebboune standing side by side, with Tebboune announcing that work, I repeat, work on the Trans-Saharan Gas Pipeline will resume after the holy month of Ramadan. The project, which was agreed in earlier memoranda between Algeria, Niger, and Nigeria, is planned to run for more than 4,000 kilometers from Nigerian gas fields through Niger to Algeria's Hassil Aramel hub, where it will link into existing export infrastructure towards Europe. For audiences across the Sahel, the joint statement looked less like a routine bilateral visit and more like the public relaunch of a long-stalled scheme that could move the region closer to the hearts of global gas markets. The opening scene presents the pipeline announcement as a turning point after months in which relations between Algeria and the Alliance of Sahel States were defined by sharp exchanges over airspaces, violations, and a downed Malian drone. Instead of new diplomatic escalations, Algeria and Niamey are now tying their figures to a more proposed corridor that, if completed, will channel Nigerian gas across Nigerian territory to Algeria's export routes, potentially shifting Niger's role from a peripheral transit country to a strategic link between West African reserves and European demand. At the same time, European states that have been reducing their dependence on Russian gas and boosting pipeline and LNG imports from suppliers such as Algeria see additional Nigerian volumes as one more piece in an evolving energy security puzzle. Yet, the apparent warmth now on display in Algiers is easier to understand when placed against the crisis that preceded it. A crisis that pushed the Sahel Alliance to close ranks against Algeria and questioned whether brotherly ties could survive a serious security incident on their shared frontier. Now, months before leaders were talking about corridors and cooperations, relations between Algeria and the Sahel Alliance were deteriorating over a single military drone flight. In the night between 31st March and 1st of April 2025, Algeria's defense ministry reported that its forces had shot down an armed surveillance drone that, it said, had violated Algerian airspace by more than 2 kilometers near the border. Locality of Trans-Saharan, Malian authorities rejected that vision, stating that debris from the Malian Armed Forces drone was found around 9.5 to 10 kilometers south of the border. Inside Malian territory, and describing the incident as a deliberate hostile act that disrupted operations against an armed group. The political reaction was immediate and collective. As members of the Alliance of Sahel States, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso issued a joint statement condemning Algeria's move and recalled their ambassadors for Algiers for consultations, framing the shoot-down as aggression against the entire confederation. Algeria, in turn, closed its airspace to flights to and from Mali, citing repeated violations and signaling that mutual trust had broken down completely. The AES, created in 2023 as a mutual defense pact by military-led governments in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and later transformed into a broader confederation, had already positioned itself as seeking greater autonomy from external pressure and had announced its intention to leave ECOWAS in early 2024, formalizing withdrawal on 29 January 2025. This air incident fed a wider narrative in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou about defending territory integrity and political choices against perceived interference. Even at the peak of that diplomatic freeze, however, unshared initiative remained present in official communications and technical meetings. A gas pipeline, first formally agreed in a 2009 pact and renewed in memoranda signed in 2022 and 2025, presented by its promoters as a way to generate revenue, enhance regional leverage, and create a direct overland link from Nigerian gas fields to European markets. Behind the public gestures in Algiers sits a project whose scale spans both geography and time. The Trans-Saharan Gas Pipeline is designed to run about 4,123 kilometers from Nigeria through Niger to Algeria's Hassi R'Mel hub, where it will connect to pipelines such as Transmed and other export routes already used to move Algerian gas towards Italy, Spain, and the wider European markets. The plant capacity is approximately 30 billion cubic meters of gas per year, with earlier estimates putting the project cost at around $10 to $13 billion. Once this is operational, it is also expected to be able to supply gas to some Sahelian regions along the route. The idea of a trans-Saharan line dates back more than 40 years, and Algeria, Nigeria, and Niger previously signed a pact in 2009, but security concerns in parts of the Sahel, financing difficulties, and shifting political priorities slowed that progress. New momentum came as global gas markets tightened, following Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine and Europe's efforts to diversify away from Russian supplies. With the three states signing a memorandum of understanding in Algiers in 2022 and a further agreement in 2025 to fast-track implementation and update feasibility work. In February 2026, after talks in Algiers, President Tebboune and General Tiani confirmed that work on the pipeline across Nigerian territory will resume after Ramadan, with Algeria's state company, Somatrach, designated to lead development on the Algerian side. For Niger, officials and supportive commentators present the route as a more than a simple transit line, arguing that it would place the country at the junction of West African gas production, Sahelian geography, and North African export infrastructure. Beyond questions of steel, volumes, and timelines, the project is also viewed by its backers as a potential way to rebalance negotiating power for the states along its path and to send a political signal to domestic and pan-African audiences that long-discussed infrastructure can advance despite insecurity and past delays. For the Alliance of Sahel States, which is Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, the revived pipeline is presented not only as an engineering vector, but as an instrument to turn geography into bargaining power. The three military-led governments, which formalized their cooperation through the Liptako-Goma Charter in 2023 and later signed a confederation treaty in July 2024, have all withdrawn from ECOWAS and framed their alliance as a step towards greater control over security and economic choices. With Niger located on the proposed TSGP route, AES leaders can present the corridor as an asset that connects West African reserves to North African export systems and, through them, to Europe by deepening cooperation with Algeria around the TSGP. Niger and its AES partners gain a platform to discuss issues such as sanction relief, security coordination, and investment in a context where Algeria also portrays itself as committed to regional stability and strategic autonomy. Algerian and Nigerian officials have linked their talks on the pipeline with commitments to strengthen joint work on border security and counterterrorism, describing the security of both countries as closely connected. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Symbolically, the move from trading accusations over a drowned drone to appearing together to endorse a shared energy project allows the AES Confederation to present the shift to its followers as evidence that earlier flashpoints can be turned into frameworks for cooperation. In diplomatic terms, it is a pivot from confrontation to codependency around a shared economic corridor. At the same time, each step that increases leverage for Sahel states along the corridor also exposes them more directly to the expectations and pressures of external partners that see the pipeline as part of a wider solution to their own energy concerns. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, European governments have sought to cut dependence on Russian gas, launching initiatives such as the Repower EU plan to phase out Russian fossil fuel imports before 2030 and diversify sources. Algeria already occupies a significant position in this reconfiguration, supplying gas via pipelines like Transmed to Italy and Medes to Spain, while also exporting liquefied natural gas by sea, bringing Nigerian gas to Algeria through Niger. This would expand that role and make the Trans-Saharan line one additional channel in Europe's efforts to spread risk across multiple suppliers and routes. For Sahel states, this shift means they are no longer viewed only through a security lens, but also as actors positioned around infrastructure that matters to European energy planning. In theory, that visibility can strengthen their hand in negotiations over pricing, local content, technology transfer, and investment that extend beyond isolated extraction sites. In practice, long experience with commodity exports has led many observers in Africa to warn that export-oriented projects can still leave most high-value activities and decision-making outside the continent. Pipelines can flow in one direction while power flows in another, and the Sahel has seen that pattern before. Now, complicating the picture further, the Trans-Saharan route is not only the only major gas corridor proposal involving Nigeria. A separate Nigeria-Morocco gas pipeline, also known as the Atlantic African Gas Pipeline, is being advanced to run along the West African coast through 13 countries before linking to Morocco and the existing Maghreb-Europe pipeline, with an expected capacity of about 30 billion cubic meters per year and an estimated cost in the order of $25 billion. That project has attracted backing and interest from regional Gulf and European actors and has been promoted by Moroccan and Nigerian officials as an Atlantic alternative that would avoid some of the Central Sahel's most insecure zones. The quiet competition between these two routes sharpens a debate that goes beyond engineering. Whether new African energy corridors will primarily answer European supply anxieties or be structured in ways that significantly change terms of trade for African states. While governments sign memoranda and companies refine visibility studies, communities along the planned TSGP route are left to consider what a revived pipeline could mean for daily life. In the short term, the most concrete promises linked to such projects typically involve construction, maintenance and security jobs, alongside possible upgrades to roads, power lines and social infrastructure bundled into broader cooperation or compensation plans. If contracts and fiscal regimes are structured in ways that secure fairer revenue shares, increased gas exports and transit fees could raise state income and expand fiscal space for spending on health, education, and infrastructure in countries facing chronic underinvestment. For members of the African diaspora, from health workers in Europe to engineers in North America, developments around the AES Confederation and large-scale energy schemes have become symbols in wider debates about sovereignty and economic independence. Supporters of the Sahel military government often point to moves such as the withdrawal from ECOWAS, the search for alternative security partnerships, and the pursuit of new resource deals as evidence that a different posture towards external powers is emerging. A functioning Niger-Algeria gas corridor can visibly benefit local populations. It could be cited in future as proof that coordinated Pan-African initiatives can produce tangible outcomes, not just rhetoric. At the same time, memories of past oil and mining booms that delivered limited change for ordinary citizens fuel concerns about environmental impacts, elite capture of revenues, and heightened security risk in areas hosting strategic infrastructure. Among politically engaged Africans and diaspora followers of development in the Sahel, the mood misses hope for structural change, with caution rooted in long experience. With expectations rising both domestically and externally, the question becomes whether leaders can manage both the opportunities and the vulnerabilities that come with tying national development plans to a single mega project running across fragile territory. Even as officials in Algiers and Niamey present their recent announcement as closing a difficult chapter and opening a cooperative one, the ground beneath the Trans-Saharan Gas Pipeline project remains uncertain. Sections of the proposed route traverse parts of northern Nigeria. Niger and southern Algeria were insurgent groups. Criminal networks and local militias, they have all been active. And where attacks on infrastructure and transport corridors have occurred in the past, this has raised concerns about potential sabotage, extortion, and the costs of security or securing such a long line. Political volatility in the Sahel, including changes in the leadership, evolving alliances, and sanctions imposed on military governments could also affect implementation schedules and financing conditions. On the financial side, while recent agreements and statements demonstrate interest from Algeria, Niger, and Nigeria, as well as attention from European actors, shifts in global gas demand, price trends, and accelerated investment in renewable energy and hydrogen, this could complicate long-term support for new fossil fuel infrastructure. But at the same time, strong strategic incentives continue to pull the project forward. Algeria aims to reinforce its position as a key energy hub, connecting African gas to Europe. Niger is looking for economic relief and international recognition after sanctions and political isolation. Nigeria, on the other hand, is seeking more reliable export channels for its large gas reserves, and European states are still working to secure additional non-Russian supplies. The result, however, is a proposed corridor that carries more than molecules and money. It has become a test case for whether African states, especially the military-led governments of the Sahel, can coordinate across borders, manage security and political risks, and convert structural leverage into durable power that supports their population. The pipeline is moving from renewed agreements and public announcements towards preparatory steps for construction. But the question is whether it ultimately stands as a symbol of effective African agency or as another line mainly feeding external demand. This will depend on decisions taken in the coming years and on how closely Africans at home and in the diaspora choose to monitor and contest those choices. This is Frontline Africa. If this kind of unfiltered Africa First analysis resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think. My name is P. Solomon, and I'll see you in the next one.